Okay, this is Melanie, Professor Melanie Hildebrandt, and I'm going to talk about the concepts of absolute and comparative advantage and then work through a couple of examples. So let's start with some basics. Comparative advantage, this economic concept, is based on the idea, it's kind of intuitive, that we should specialize in tasks that we're better at, better than some other person. We can compare firms, we can compare production of countries. So the economic law, we call it the law of comparative advantage, states that the individual, the firm, the country with the lowest opportunity cost of producing something should specialize in that production. And that once we specialize in exchange with each other, both parties that are involved in the market exchange are going to be better off. Recall from also in this chapter, the text talks about opportunity cost, the value of the next best alternative. So if I'm spending my time baking cookies, this means I can't spend my same time baking a pie, for example. Let's look at the difference really quickly then between absolute and comparative advantage. So absolute advantage says that I can make something either using fewer resources than other producers. So if we look at my first example here, it says Nathan can mow the lawn in 1 hour. So that's his resource, 1 hour of time. Melanie can mow the lawn in 2 hours. So again, that's the resource. So in that first example, Nathan has the absolute advantage in mowing the lawn because it takes him less time being the resource. The other way you can look at absolute is which producer gets the higher yield. They produce more. So looking at the second example then, it takes Melanie 1 hour to bake 100 cookies. It takes Nathan 1 hour to bake 50 cookies. Our resource is the same. We each use 1 hour of baking time. My yield is 100 cookies. His yield is 50 cookies. I have the absolute advantage. But again, that's not what we're going to base specialization and exchange on. We're going to base that on comparative advantage. Who can make something with the lower opportunity cost? So example 3, Melanie gives up baking a fourth of a pie for 100 cookies. Nathan gives up baking half a pie for 100 cookies. So in order to get those 100 cookies, Nathan has to give up more. He has to give up half a pie, which is more than a quarter of a pie. So Melanie here would have the comparative advantage. All right, let's get into some more specific examples to try to make this economic concept a little bit more concrete. So first, we got these two guys, Joe and Bob, and they're trying to just, survive on an island. They're on this they're both stranded on this deserted island. They have a choice. They can work individually. We'll look at that first, or they can work together. We'll look at that second to try to survive. They have the same available resource each day, 8 hours of daylight. They can take this resource and either use the daylight to catch fish and eat those, or to gather coconuts and drink the milk and, eat the coconut flesh, all of that. But our bodies need protein in order to survive. And so each guy needs a minimum of 4 fish per day just to kind of maintain themselves and survive. So this first chart here has the production possibilities. They're not working together. They're doing their own thing. And remember, their resource is 8 hours per day. So let's just say if they wanted to divide their day into 2 halves, a 4-hour lot of fishing and 4 hours of coconut gathering. Well, Joe can get 4 fish. Bob can catch 2. So the absolute advantage goes to Joe. Okay. And then for gathering of coconuts, Joe in 4 hours can gather 10 coconuts. Bob can only gather 8. So again, absolute advantage goes to Joe. Does this mean Joe wouldn't be better off working with Bob? We'll see in just a second. So Joe decides he likes some variety in his diet, so he's going to continue to split his day. He will have 4 fish at the end of the day and 10 coconuts. But poor Bob. Bob, looking back at this first chart, takes him 4 hours just to get 2 fish. But recall, he needs a minimum of 4 fish per day. What does that mean? It means that Bob spends all day fishing. So he spends 8 hours to get 4 fish. And he has no time then to gather coconuts. His day is gone. So if we add up what each guy can do to get total island production, we have 8 fish being produced and 10 coconuts. Well, again, we're going to base the idea of specialization on comparative advantage. So now we need to calculate each guy's opportunity cost of fishing or the opportunity cost of gathering the coconuts. So we're going to have to do a little bit of math here. So the opportunity cost of fish is how many coconuts do we give up? So you put the coconuts on top, so 10 divided by the 4 fish that Joe could catch in 4 hours. So Joe gives up 2.5 coconuts for 1 fish. If you do the math for Bob, it's 8 coconuts over 2 fish, or 4 coconuts for every fish. So see, Joe gives up less coconuts to get a fish. 2.5 is less than 4, okay? If we then do the same math, but doing it, you kind of reverse it, you invert that fraction to put fish on top, you would see that Joe's opportunity cost of coconuts is 4/10 of a fish, and Bob's is 0.25 of a fish. And so Bob has the lower opportunity cost of gathering coconuts. So what does this mean? It means Joe's comparative advantage is in fishing, Bob's comparative advantage is in gathering coconuts. So now both guys are going to take all 8 hours and put it where their comparative advantage is. So Joe spends all day catching fish. He catches 4 fish in each block times 2 halves of his day, right? 4 times 2 will give us 8 total fish being caught by Joe. He'll gather no coconuts. His day is done. Bob, on the other hand, spends no time catching fish. Instead, he gathers 8 coconuts in each 4-hour block. 8 times 2 is 16 coconuts that Bob is able to gather. Our fish production stayed the same, but you see that total production in the island has gone up by 6 coconuts. So from an economic standpoint, we would say that both Joe and Bob are better off specializing where they have a comparative advantage and then exchanging with one another. Truly, the economic idea of comparative advantage is one of the cornerstone ideas for why international trade makes countries and therefore individuals in those countries better off. So let's look at an example of the gains of trade with 2 countries. So we have 2 countries here, Shetland and North Mocha, and they each have what we're calling 5 resource units. So recall from the first chapter, we have different resources, natural resources, capital, entrepreneurship, human resources. So a resource unit is simply a combination of those different types of resources. So each country here has 5 resource units. Right now, they're each choosing to put 3 resource units into the production of cotton and 2 resource units into wheat. So since the resource units going in are the same, to calculate absolute advantage, we can simply compare the yield. And if you do, you see that the absolute advantage in cotton goes to Shetland because 30 bales of cotton is better than 15. Guess what? Shetland also has the the absolute advantage in wheat because 60 bushels of wheat is preferred to 40 bushels of wheat. So if they work individually, we would see that 45 bales of cotton would be produced and 100 bushels of wheat. So we have to ask the question, does this mean Shetland can't benefit from trade? Well, in order to answer that, we're going to have to calculate the comparative advantage, which means we're going to have to calculate these countries' opportunity cost. So our opportunity cost of cotton is the bushels of wheat that cannot be produced because we're growing cotton. So you divide the production of wheat by the production of cotton for each country. So we take 60 bushels of wheat divided by 30 bales of cotton for Shetland. The opportunity cost is 2 bushels of wheat per 1 bale of cotton. Same format here, same process for North Mocha, 40 bushels divided by 15, or 2.66. So Shetland has the lower opportunity cost here. 2 bushels of wheat is less than 2.66. So cotton, we would say, is where Shetland has the comparative advantage. We do the same thing for calculating the opportunity cost of wheat, except for now cotton goes on top. And so we would see Shetland, they give up half a bale, whereas North Mocha gives up 0.375. This is a lower number here, so North Mocha gives up less cotton to get 1 bushel of wheat, and so wheat is where North Mocha has the comparative advantage. So now that we've decided where they have comparative advantage, let's see if we can be better off. We're going to use some more math to see these benefits of trade. Okay. So what's going to happen now is all of their resources are going to where they have the comparative advantage. So we said Sheetland has the comparative advantage in cotton. So all 5 resource units go to cotton, 0 resource units into wheat. And the opposite for North Mocha, 0 to cotton, 5 to wheat. And you may be wondering where these numbers come from, but first, recall that total production when there was no specialization or trade was 40 bales of cotton, 100 bushels of wheat, okay? Now I'm going to show you where the numbers come from in this chart here. So here's the chart we started with. So again, Sheetland is going to put everything into cotton, but we need to know how much they can produce. Well, when 3 resource units went into cotton, Sheetland was able to produce 30 bales of cotton. So 30 divided by 3, Sheetland produces 10 bales of cotton for every 1 resource unit. So if all 5 go into cotton, 5 times 10 is 50 bales of cotton. Now we look at North Mocha and wheat. If they put 2 resource units in, they get 40 bushels out. 40 divided by 2 means that North Mocha gets 20 bushels of wheat for every 1 resource unit. So if 5 resource units go in, 5 times 20 is 100 bushels. So now we have 50 bales of cotton being produced, 100 bushels of wheat. And so overall, we have gained 5 bales of cotton through specialization and exchange based on this idea of comparative advantage. And I hope that helps clear up this concept some.